what are the left-wing reform proposals in this situation? They say, let's tax the rich. What are the libertarian reform proposals? Let's get rid of inflation. To some extent, that means the same thing. We would indeed indirectly tax the rich because we would prevent asset price inflation. So I think if people were just to come together and talk a bit about these issues rationally, they would see that there might actually be room for a broad coalition between people who are concerned with some of the issues that we've been discussing.
That's so funny.
From the left and the right, and then instead of taxing the rich, you just get rid of inflationary policies, and I think the outcome would be much healthier.
Right, morning, Carl. How are you?
Good morning, Peter. I'm fine.
Good to see you.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, it's an interesting time to talk about economics, and interesting time to talk about politics, especially in Europe. Would you say the decline of Europe is now inevitable, or can we reverse this trend?
Well, it can always be reversed, I would say. It just depends on the political will, and I don't see that to be there at the moment. But in principle, it could be reversed. It's all a matter of economic policies. If we put in place the right policies, we can reverse the trend.
Does politics reward bad economic policies?
Well, yes, clearly. I mean, the incentives for politicians right now are such that you want to give visible short-term benefits to certain groups and ideally disperse the costs on a large part of the population and ideally push the costs into the future. So one way of doing this is inflation. Right, inflationary finance of government policies allows you to provide all kinds of benefits in the short run for selected groups. They are visible. You can point at those and say, look what we have done. And the cost will come later in the form of inflation and higher government debt.
I keep making an argument to mainly people on the left that if you vote for a party that has economic policies that are inflationary, you are making the rich richer and the poor poorer. Yet ideologically, you talk about helping support the poorest in society. But the most damaging thing we do is inflationary economics. It has a pernicious effect on the poorest in society. Yet I cannot seem to land that message with them.
Well, I think you're completely right. That's one of the topics I've been working on quite a bit over the past years, is inflation and inflationary monetary policy and how it influences the distribution of wealth and income in society. And I think it's very clear that inflationary policies increase inequality. And there are multiple channels through which this works. But one of them clearly is overproportionate asset price inflation, which unfortunately is ignored in the official inflation measures. So when we say we have 2 or 3% inflation, we are talking about consumer price inflation.
The basket of goods.
Exactly. So asset prices are excluded. And the official policy goal in the Eurozone as well as in the UK or in the US is to stabilize inflation around 2%. And that is inflation in terms of consumer prices, consumer goods and services. And even if we were to accomplish that, and we can assume for the moment, for the sake of the argument, that inflation measurement is accurate and monetary policy actually tries to control that inflation rate, even if everything works out as intended, we are very likely to have overproportionate asset price inflation for very simple reasons. If you create such an inflationary environment, it changes how people behave. So there is, first of all, a shift in saving behavior, right? You have 2% inflation on average over time. You try to protect your savings in some way. So you have an incentive to redirect your savings into asset categories that protect you from inflation. So for example, you buy real estate you buy stocks, you buy Bitcoin, you buy precious metals, etc. Anything that can protect your savings from inflation. And so there is this shift in the demand for certain assets, and this creates an overproportionate price inflation for those assets. So there is an increase in demand for these assets that goes beyond the mere increase in the money stock. So that's why we end up observing overproportionate asset price inflation. And so now the problem is that overproportionate asset price inflation is good for all the people who already own assets, but it's very bad for those who don't. So the difference, the gulf between the haves and the have-nots increases because of asset price inflation.
So would you say that CPI is bent towards the cost of survival, but with inflation we should really be considering the cost of living? And what I mean by that, cost of survival is, what is my basket of goods? Can I heat my home? Can I feed my family? But we're not considering people, one, getting on the housing ladder, and two, being able to create that nest egg for when they retire.
Yeah, so I mean, there's it's a long history of economic thought on the topic of how to measure inflation. And I've been working recently on one Austrian economist in particular by the name of Gottfried Haberler, who has written a habilitation thesis on this topic. And he lines out all of the assumptions we have to make in order to actually come close to an accurate assessment of what the inflation rate is. And one of the assumptions is that we have to assume a pure consumer. So if we try to sort of incorporate asset prices and also incorporate the possibility that people save and build up wealth for the future, then we end up in a situation where we can really not disentangle income and wealth anymore. So this creates all kinds of complications. So if we just assume that we have a pure consumer, then inflation measurement becomes easier and potentially more accurate. And that's the origin of why today, when we talk about inflation, we only look at consumer prices. But of course, that's highly problematic, right? The inflation measurement pretends to help us to assess the standard of living of people, but it only looks at consumer prices as if only consumer prices have an impact on your standard of living.
And that's very short-term thinking.
Exactly. It's only in the present, right? What saving and building up wealth does is providing for the future, and that's completely left out of the picture in the official measures. I think that's a big problem. And despite all the complications that we have when we incorporate asset prices into our inflation measure, we should still do it because it's so much more informative.
But if we did, would the inflation numbers be so high that we would like the voters would realize, so many voters would realize how much is being stolen from them, and we would have the pitchforks out?
Yeah, I don't know about that. I think people feel that anyway. Whether the official inflation measure is high or low, people feel what they lose, and they feel how much more expensive things have become, and they see that their income doesn't catch up with prices. So.
But what would be say in the UK at the moment, our inflation rate, I think we're at about 3.6% on the measure of CPI. And we also know they move things in and out of that basket.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I think a steak should be in that basket, but they don't want the peasants to eat steak anymore. I think we're only allowed chicken. But if we were to consider asset prices as well, where do you think that inflation number may actually realistically be?
I don't know for the UK, but I reckon the situation is pretty similar to some countries in Europe, like Germany or France. And I've done some work on Germany, and a colleague of mine and I, we tried to come up with an alternative inflation measure incorporating assets, stocks and real estate, and public goods as well. So government-provided public goods. They obviously also cost us something. Mm-hmm. And if you do that, then the official inflation measure would easily be 1 to 2 percentage points higher. Depends on how you weight these things. And I think there's a good argument to be made that CPI inflation as measured right now is also distorted. But that's a whole other discussion. So it would easily be 1 to 2 percentage points higher over the long term. And there are periods where it is more than 3 to or 4 percentage points higher. Shorter periods where you have like real estate bubbles and things like that.
So realistically, are we living through double-digit inflation and trying to convince people we're in low single-digit inflation?
I wouldn't go that far.
Okay.
We have double-digit inflation, for example, in the real estate sector. I mean, very clearly over the past couple of years in Germany, in the big cities, we had close to 10% inflation for apartments and so on. And I think the situation in the UK has been similar.
Is that part regulation that's slowing house building as opposed to monetary inflation?
Well, it's both.
Both.
It's both. Of course, it's monetary inflation is the driver. The inflation of the money stock is the driver, the main driver of inflation in all areas of the economy. But then, of course, you have regulations in place that restrict supply for real estate. And so that makes it then a very attractive asset to invest in for wealthy people. Right? You think about how to protect your savings. You see, okay, there's real estate and supply is limited because of all kinds of regulations and artificial costs imposed by the government. And so, yeah, you might just as well buy an apartment and you can pretty much count on the price increasing further into the future. So it's an easy way to protect your savings and even make a profit.
In an environment where the economy is growing and productivity is growing, and there is very low inflation, is inequality itself a bad thing, or is inequality a problem where the rich are getting materially richer and the poor are getting materially poorer? Like, if the whole pie is growing, does inequality matter?
I think it does, because it always depends on the process by which the inequality comes about. So
if it comes about purely from honest actors creating businesses rather than through the Cantillon effect.
Yeah, I mean, I would be fine with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a libertarian or classical liberal, whatever you want to call it, and I think that's the type of inequality that is completely acceptable, and I think most people are on board with that. You know, if it is a fair process of voluntary exchange and production and so on, people make decisions in their lives, and of course, naturally, inequality emerges. That's something that just naturally happens. And most people, I think, are perfectly fine with that. The problem is inequality that comes about in an unjust process. And you might argue that inflation is just such an unjust process, where you become richer because you already own assets and not because you produce new things that other people want to buy.
I would agree with that argument.
So that's the type of inequality that we should be discussing, I think. And also as libertarians, of course, or free market people, we should be very concerned with that type of inequality because people perceive it. Maybe not in a clear way. They don't have a clear understanding of what cause and effects are, but they see that there is unjust inequality all around. And under the presupposition that we have a free market system or a capitalist system, they will end up being critical of capitalism and then try to overthrow the system.
Which is what we're seeing right now. We're seeing a massive rise here in the UK of overt support of socialism. I'm going to play you a video in a second.
Sure.
Actually, should we play that now? Do we need the headphones?
If you stick your headphones on, they're at the end of your mic.
Just watch. This is. Let me explain who this is first. Her name is Zara Sultana. She's a MP, I think, in Coventry. She was part of the Labour Party. She's quit the Labour Party because she doesn't believe, I think because they're left-wing enough, and she's now part of a new party called Your Party with Jeremy Corbyn, who is very left-wing. But just listen, she did an interview with Owen Jones.
You asked yesterday about kind of policies for the country, and you said nationalise the entire economy. So just wondering, what does that look like?
that looks like a socialist transformation of the country where we nationalize utilities, we nationalize energy, we nationalize transport, we nationalize communications, including the internet, but we also have to broaden our horizons.
But not the entire economy, though.
So we have to have a socialist economy that includes workers running their workplaces through cooperatives. It means public services run for profit, not need, with, workers and users on the boards of those organisations.
Democratic ownership.
And it means the entire economy run by workers, not the billionaires and the corporations that run it today.
So I'm just interested because like kiosks, like small little cafe kiosks, that kind of thing.
Workers' cooperatives.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm just interested because you said the entire. I'm just trying to. I think it's fascinating.
The entire economy under the control of workers.
Okay.
Whether.
Yes. So I think we both would be equally concerned by what she's saying, but I have an empathy for why some people have got there.
I do too, yes.
I don't have an empathy if they haven't then studied history and what's happened every time an economy has been put in control of the workers. We don't have to recycle that. But I have an empathy for how she's got there. And we are seeing a huge growth in people who are overtly claiming to be socialists, wanting a socialist revolution. We saw Mandami win in New York. And we're seeing your party growing. In the UK, we have Zach Polanski from the Green Party saying similar things, not as extreme as her, but also saying similar things to her. And I think my view is they are confusing cronyism with capitalism.
Absolutely, yes. And I must say it's been a very long time for me that I have seen somebody explicitly advocating a real socialist system, and she meant it, right? Nationalization of basically everything. Most people who talk about socialism and advocate socialism basically mean something else than actual socialism. They want a free market system with a lot of government interventions and redistribution. So that's basically it. Mm-hmm. That's what they call socialism. But what she was just talking about is actual socialism, nationalization of businesses and everything. That would be a real socialist system. And yeah, it would be good if people studied history, because this has never been successful, such a system. And there are good economic reasons to believe that it will not work that easily.
Well, what would you say to her? What would be the first thing you would say to her?
Well, the first thing is that you can set up cooperatives already in a free market system. Try it out. If it works well, then people should be doing it, trying it. If people like working in there should be a flood of people willing to work there, and it should actually be able to compete with other types of businesses. Yeah, the beauty of a free market system is that you can try it out. You can try out your model of how the business should be run, of how you incorporate what the workers want into the decision-making of the business. And I think every business owner thinks about that, because you want to create a relatively pleasant environment for the people to work in your business, right? This is how you attract good people, productive people who are willing to make an effort and produce things in your business. So that would be the first thing. And the second thing is, if you nationalize everything, you get rid of some of the very fundamental institutional prerequisites to make rational economic decisions. If you nationalize everything, there is no system of exchange between different individuals. There is no exchange for the factors of production, and then there is no price formation for the factors of production. And if you have no market prices for factors of production, you cannot actually make rational economic decisions of how to produce things. And this is the main reason why socialist systems end up being economically inefficient, because they cannot rationally calculate. They cannot make rational economic decisions of how to produce and what to produce in what quantities. And this is the main argument that we have known for now more than 100 years. For why socialism doesn't work.
The humble bee, a keystone species crucial to the survival of Earth's inhabitants. Here's how things would look if bees vanished. And here's how they'd look if humans vanished. But imagine if instead we became a keystone species by doing things the right way, by taking responsibility for our actions and becoming the solution. Iron mines the world's most responsible currency the right way. Because the future depends on it.
I do want to stick with inflation, go back to inflation for a bit and stick with that, because I think it's a really important point. I personally, this is the main topic which I try and talk to people about. My view is if people understood scarcity and understood inflation, they would expect better or demand better from the politicians that we have. How important is it to understand scarcity?
Scarcity is the fundamental economic problem, right? We only have to think about economics because there is scarcity, which means there is not enough of the stuff that we would like to have. Or put differently, we cannot satisfy all of our wants with the disposable resources. So we have to make decisions. What are the wants or the desires, the needs we want to satisfy, and how do we do it? Those are economic decisions. And it's only because of scarcity that we have to make these economic decisions. If there's no scarcity, actually there would be no place for economics, because then we could just do anything we want.
So would you say, therefore, the problem with government is that when you look at the institution of government, their job is to accumulate and retain power. And in a society where people don't want to accept scarcity, they use inflation to try and eliminate scarcity where possible. But ultimately that creates an inflationary environment where the important scarce assets inflate and benefit the richest and punish the poorest.
Yeah, that's a very, very important point. The pernicious, diabolic thing about inflation is that it lets us believe that there is no scarcity. It creates this illusion that we can do much more than we actually can. But inflation, or the increase of the money stock, printing money, to put it simply, never gets rid of real scarcities. The real scarcities are just there. The real resources that we can use are just what they are. They are limited. And by printing money, we do not increase the real resources at our disposal. We just create an illusion that we might be able to do all kinds of things, and we set in motion a redistribution process through inflation, obviously. When the government prints up money and then gets to spend the money, they divert real resources from other actors in the economy, and then they can do things. But they do not increase the amount of real resources through printing up money. And yeah, so to the extent that inflationary government finance is used in order to, accomplish all kinds of political goals, finance all kinds of political programs, we just impose the costs of these programs on the larger public, and that's what people are feeling, in terms of higher prices. And that's a natural process that kicks in. We print money in order to finance certain activities, but the real resources are limited, so the price of the real resources has to increase in order to bring our economic activities in line with what is actually possible.
So is welfare itself, therefore, downstream from inflation? It is a comforting kind of, medical support given to the poorest in society to, placate them as they're being so damaged by inflation?
So by welfare, you mean the welfare state,
Yeah.
welfare programs. They are financed to some extent also through inflationary finance.
But are they necessity because of inflation?
I wouldn't say so. inflation and the increase in inequality makes it increasingly difficult for us now to reform the system, because inflation, as you said, makes the poor poorer and makes them even more dependent on welfare. So it's very difficult to get out of this situation right now. And if you were to if you think about how could we reform the system, you shouldn't get rid of welfare spending as the first step of your reform program.
Yeah.
I think that would be a very bad idea. And I think on that, the Milei government in Argentina has been very clear. That's also something that they emphasized. We don't want to get rid of welfare spending for the most vulnerable in society. So that's very important. But what you should be doing is to reduce inflationary government finance. And on this point, the Milei government is not very good. You should be reducing that. You should, of course, liberate markets, get rid of costly regulations, create an environment in which people can set up businesses and make a living and help themselves get out of poverty and get out of the welfare dependency. And then eventually you can start reforming the welfare system, but that comes last. You first create an environment where people can actually thrive and make a living and increase their own well-being.
I'm glad you brought up Milei. We went out to Argentina a couple of years ago, just before he was elected, and there was a lot of hope with Milei within Argentina. But also, my background is in the world of the Bitcoin people. A lot of libertarians, Austrian economists, also saw Milei as the great hope, as the a kind of real-world lens on libertarian and libertarian ideas and Austrian economics. Yet there has also been a lot of disappointment within the world of libertarians and Austrians. Why is that? Where do you think he failed? Where did he not go hard enough?
Well, there are a couple of things that I have been disappointed with. So first of all, he promised to get rid of the central bank. I think that would have been a great thing if he had already done it. I hope he will still do it. And the most recent election gave him some more political power to actually continue his reform program. And we will see how far he can go. I would really like to see that, abolishing the Argentinian central bank. But I mean, I'm not in politics, so I don't know what the constraints are. It must be very difficult to reform such a system. So I wouldn't blame him for that.
Why though? And I assume you would also want what's this, Connor?
The Argentinian inflation rates.
So the inflation rates have come down.
Oh yeah, they have significantly come down. But if you look, for example, at monetary growth, M2, it has, I think, don't quote me on this, but I think it has doubled since Milei is in office, which is quite striking. And this is the source of all evil, if you like. Yeah, if you want to reform the system, get rid of inflationary monetary policy, and he hasn't really done it. I mean, to some extent, he has improved the situation. Official inflation rates have come down. They are now at, I think, 30% or something.
But that's
31.
Still really high.
It's still really high, and the money stock has increased significantly. And when I saw this, I recently looked into the data. It pretty much looks like Venezuela, and this is shocking to me. And there's another aspect that I have been disappointed with, is that he has not managed to free the exchange rate. He has exchange rate controls in place. So he continues to manipulate the exchange rate of the Argentinian peso with the US dollar. And you might wonder, why is he doing this? Everybody before him has done it. Why have they done it? Well, this
dollars.
It creates a favorable environment for the wealthy Argentinians to transfer assets into other countries. Well, that's a left-wing critique, of course. Yanis Varoufakis has pointed this out in a very interesting piece couple of months ago, where he said Milei is not a libertarian. And I think that's fascinating. Yanis Varoufakis saying Milei is not a libertarian. Why? Because he kept exchange controls in place. If you are a free market guy, you are all about market prices, you want to liberate market prices,
You trust the market.
get rid of price controls. What is the most important price in the economy? Certainly the price of your money. So you get rid of exchange controls. Milei hasn't done it.
And
He has implemented some steps in order to get closer to actually freeing them, and I hope he will continue. But that would have been an easy thing to do.
Do you think he's trying to wean them off this slowly?
I don't know. I don't know what the reasons are and the motives. I'm just fascinated also by the positive things he has done. He has made quite he had quite an impact far beyond Argentina, getting people interested in libertarian free market ideas, and that's something great. I mean, this reminds me a bit of the Ron Paul effect we had a couple of years ago in the US, or a decade ago, or more than a decade ago. But that was primarily in the US. Now, Milei is a global phenomenon, really. I've met people in France and Germany and Switzerland who got interested in free market economics, libertarianism because of Milei. And I think that's fantastic. That's great. So he used the political stage, to popularize some of the ideas that I think are important. And that's great. But he remains a politician. And as a free market guy, you should always be skeptical about politicians. And libertarians around the world, especially academics, should keep a healthy distance and should be able to also criticize what Milei is doing.
I do wonder if it's because he's playing more of a long game, and there's only so much he can do in the short term, which would have risk some kind of short-term catastrophic effect, and he wants to be able to maintain that this project that he runs is for multiple terms, 8, 12, 16 years, rather than short 2 to 4 years when things haven't worked out immediately that people would be coming for his head. I wonder if he's trying to thread that needle.
But at the same time, if you want to make bold reforms, and this is what he said he would be doing, you have to do it right at the beginning. Because the positive effects will always take a while to materialize. And if you want to capitalize on those, also as a politician, if you want to be re-elected, you have to do it relatively quickly at the beginning of your mandate, and then hope for the best.
And so you believe the UK should get rid of the Bank of England, the EU should get rid of the European Central Bank, the US should get rid of the Fed?
Well, in the long term, yes. I think for Argentina it would have been easy to get rid of their central bank, because the Argentinian economy is implicitly already dollarized. Most people are using dollars to save and for exchanges as well. So the step would not have been that big for them to make that decision. That would be much harder in the UK, much harder in the US and in Europe. So I would be in favor of some other reforms, certainly monetary policy reforms first, before we get rid of the central bank.
Do you find it weird having so much conviction in kind of the economic ideas that you have? Do you find it weird that it is actually still so fringe?
I don't think it is that fringe. In my experience, you have to study economics for many years in order to convince yourself that this is fringe. So when I talk to economics colleagues, I have a hard time sometimes. But when I talk to regular people and I present them with my arguments, they seem to be fine. They agree on most of it.
Do you mean fringe in terms of not implemented?
Yeah, I mean in terms of...
the powers aren't actually doing this.
That goes back to my point earlier, is that to be a successful politician, do you have to promote poor economics?
Well,
how do you sell free market economics to the wider public? Because you are eliminating a lot of the free stuff they're used to. You're making it's a bit like I used to be I don't know, let's say 8 years ago I was 13 stone, now I'm 16 stone. I put a little bit of weight on every day for 8 years. And to get back down, it's going to take me another couple of years of hard work.
Right.
And I think of the economy as similar. It's like, if you want to build things in life, businesses and wealth and prosperity, it takes time. And perhaps people just don't want the hard work of a free market.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly one problem. The things that feel good and are beneficial in the short term are often costly in the long term. I mean, that's true in your personal life when you talk about your weight.
Mm-hmm.
It's nice to have a good meal or to eat sweets. You enjoy that. It's hard to work out every day. So what is good in the short run, enjoyable in the short run, might have negative consequences in the long run. And what is hard in the short run might actually be very good for you in the long run. And that's the same with the economic system. And now the political system is such that you have an incentive to provide these short-term benefits that are nice to have, right? But they tend to be costly in the long run. So I don't count on the political system itself to reform our economy, because, as I said, it's costly in the short term. And Milei was very good on this. He said from the beginning, this is going to be very costly. We have to do this, this, and that. And bear with me, it will take a while, but you will see that it is worthwhile. And the population understood that, or a majority of the population seemed to agree with him. So this only worked in Argentina because the population was ready for it. They were ready to say, yes, actually, it's going to be costly in the short term, but we've seen it for decades, that the alternatives don't work, and now let's just try it, okay? So the political system will only be able to implement the reforms once a majority is already there understanding the problem.
So things have to get terrible.
Or, either they have to learn by experience or they learn in some other way. I think that's the task of education, of professors, of teachers. Try to educate people about economics in particular, and that's in this case, and make them understand what is important and how an economy works and what are the foundations of wealth and so on. But most likely things have to get bad, very bad first before people reconsider and think about alternatives.
Isn't that sad? I mean, I think about it here in the UK. I desperately would like us to have a much smaller government, deregulate as much as possible, go much further towards a free market system. Selling that is very hard. Sometimes, if I meet a friend head on, we go for a beer and we talk about any struggles they've had. They may say, do you know what, life's got really expensive. I've paid my mortgage and I've made my car payments and I've paid my bills this month and I've got three weeks till my next payday and I've got £200 to live on till the end of the month. I haven't got any disposable income. I can't really go out as much anymore. And you start to explain to them very slowly, step by step, why this has happened, why how inflation has been so pernicious on them, and you can kind of win them over.
Yeah, exactly.
But I don't see any politician in the UK having any success trying to sell this to the wider public as something that their political party should stand for, and that what the public should vote for. Yeah. They're all kind of going for similar versions of the same thing, which is keeping the, I don't know, keep rolling the dice, keep going, keep playing the same game, and I find it so frustrating.
I can understand. I think that's very frustrating. The good news is you're not Argentina yet, so maybe that comes in a couple of decades.
Like we're heading there, though. I mean, Europe.
Oh, you
itself.
certainly are, as we are in Europe, in Germany, and France, certainly.
Isn't one of the uncomfortable truths that, let's take the US for example, the stock market relies on inflation in a way, and the powers that be, which are the top 500 companies, are going to have a lot of persuasion over the politicians to not really solve this thing.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very good point. A German colleague of mine, Thorsten Polleit, termed a very nice phrase, collective corruption, in a publication a couple of years ago. And this is exactly what you see. There's a degree of collective corruption among the elites who are in a position to reform the system. And even if they understand all the problems, the redistribution effects of inflation and how it makes poor people poorer and themselves wealthier, this is exactly the problem. It makes themselves wealthier. So they are at the receiving end of the redistribution process. And so they have no economic incentive to actually reform the system. And even worse, they wouldn't admit in public debates that there are these kinds of problems. So you're actually not allowed to bring them up in the political discourse. And if you do, you are quickly, called a fringe politician or economist or whatever. So it's not acceptable to even bring up these points in public debates very often.
But it would also bring everything down, because the pension system is linked to the stock market. The stock market is considered a national interest. A reset of the entire system to get back to a fairer system based on real and true economics would be highly damaging to so many people in the short term. And also there's a geopolitical angle to this, in that for the US to reset may put it on a anti-competitive position geopolitically with China, Russia, etc.
And also half the world would have to reset because they're on US dollar standard.
No, I mean, look, I think
it's a big job, man.
There's a big job. And now, what are the left-wing reform proposals in this situation? They say, let's tax the rich. What are the libertarian reform proposals? Let's get rid of inflation. To some extent, that means the same thing. We would indeed indirectly tax the rich because we would prevent asset price inflation. So I think if people were just to come together and talk a bit about these issues rationally, they would see that there might actually be room for a broad coalition between people who are concerned with some of the issues that we've been discussing.
That's so funny.
From the left and the right. And then instead of taxing the rich, you just get rid of inflationary policies. And I think the outcome would be much healthier.
What did I say yesterday? I had this conversation yesterday. I said we made a show. I was talking to the camera. I said the biggest tax you can put on the rich is just getting rid of inflation.
Yeah,
because you talk about a wealth tax.
Inflation is a tax on the poor and a subsidy for the rich. That's exactly the way to put it.
Yeah, the Zach Polanski talks about a 1% wealth tax on people with more than 10 million of assets and a 2% on billionaires. And the problem with these kind of taxes is that people may just leave the country. Yeah, psychologically, it may be a reason to leave. But if you got rid of inflation, I think that would cost the rich more, and they wouldn't leave.
Yeah, exactly. So there are real problems with wealth taxes, and I mean there have been some countries that tried it out. Few countries still have wealth taxes in place. But clearly there's this effect that the wealthier leave, and then you don't even have higher government revenue because there's nobody to tax. And also, if you tax wealth, there is a long-term negative effect, or there tends to be a long-term negative effect on wage developments. This is something that people don't realize. Labor, human effort that goes into the production process, is complementary to wealth or capital. And when you tax capital, you reduce the capital stock of the economy, then the productivity of labor will go down and real wages have to decline, relatively speaking. They will be lower than they would otherwise have been. So taxing the rich and taxing wealth and taxing capital in the long term is not a good idea. Also for the most vulnerable in society, the people who exclusively depend on their labor income.
Well, what is the trajectory for Europe? How do you think about Europe in, say, 20 years' time if we don't see some types of reform? And is Europe particularly vulnerable on the global scale?
Yeah, I think Europe is somewhat squeezed in between the two big power centers in the world right now, the US and China. It's in a very difficult position. I think what we will observe in the next 20 years, that's the time horizon you choose, is continued gradual decline, continued inflationary government finance, higher inflation rates. We will get used to those. There will be some more regulations put in place to deal with some of the negative effects of inflation. But there will be no structural reforms, I believe. And I don't think we will see a big crash either. It's more likely that we will see gradual decline.
Slow decay.
Yeah.
So we will become Argentina.
Yeah, probably. But I don't know. I mean, I hope things change. I hope that people realize that there are other possibilities. Yeah, and we could, if we were just willing to do it, we could reform the system and very quickly get back on a prosperous growth path.
The removal of inflation, what reforms would be required? Obviously, we would want to get rid of QE and governments printing money, but do you think we also would require a move to full reserve banking?
Yeah, I don't think that's
or a
necessarily required. I mean, I think it would be desirable to have full reserve banking. I know that there are many Austrian economists also who disagree on that. There's a debate to be had, but I think that the fractional reserve banking system has overall destabilized the financial markets, and but I'm willing to just have something that we might call free banking, and then so a free market in money provision and banking, and then let's just see what the models would be, the business models that banks come up with, and maybe they engage in some type of fractional reserve banking. Historically, we have seen that too.
But there are penalties if it's a free market because you don't have a central bank to bail you out.
No, exactly. And you have a much healthier risk assessment in that situation, right? When the central bank is not there to bail you out, you think twice about what risks you want to take and what risks might be too high.
Do you think the world could adopt a free market for money? I mean, it's
Absolutely.
a great economic idea. It's a great...
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's not utopian at all, I think. It just depends on people realizing that, that it might actually work, and then doing it.
Can Bitcoin be that free market for money?
Potentially, yes. Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies could play an important role in a free market for money. Yes, absolutely. And I mean, these technological advances have been amazing to see, and they create all kinds of new possibilities to actually make it work.
Are we sometimes, as Austrian economists, I'm not going to call myself an Austrian economist, a supporter of Austrian ideas, you're an economist. Do we live too much in the thesis of what we want reality to be? I've been reading a lot more recently of like Friedrich Hayek and Ludwig von Mises, and actually the majority of the arguments I get drawn to are the criticisms of the state, the criticism of government, the pernicious effects they have, that a free market outside of government works fairly well.
Yeah.
But I also was reading recently some of the work of Minsky,
Right.
who seems to live more in the world of the reality there is a government. Where are you in that cross section of the thesis world of the Austrians and the reality, the kind of real world we live in?
I think that the accusation that Austrians only live in theory, far detached from reality, is not fair. I mean, economics is a scientific discipline where you develop theories, and of course, occasionally that can come across as fairly unrealistic or detached from the real world. But I think Austrians have also always been concerned about real-world problems. And Mises, for example, was very clear on this. He talked about the importance of of economics, of proper economic theory to understand how the world works and how civilization works and how we can protect our civilization. And Hayek, whom you mentioned, has written one of his most famous books, The Road to Serfdom, is not an academic treatise that tries to lay out, a grand theory of things, but is talking about very practical, real-world problems in the political process and so on. The post-Keynesians are just as theoretical as the Austrians, I would say. Hyman Minsky was a theoretical economist also, of course. They accepted the existence of the central bank, let's say. Austrians tend to talk about a world without a central bank, and that might come across as unrealistic. But Austrians also think about what can be done within the system that we have right now, right? What should be the next reform steps and so on. There are some Austrians who thought about this. How can we reform monetary policy? How can we get closer to the world where we actually don't need the central banks anymore? And my approach to all of these different camps is always to try to find what is good and true in them. Hyman Minsky, for example, I have great admiration for him. He talked about some very important aspects of financial markets, and in particular, he emphasized the great danger of over-indebtedness of an economy. When there's too much leverage in the economy, how it destabilizes the economy, makes it more fragile, makes economic crisis more likely, and this fits perfectly into the Austrian business cycle theory. I don't think that these different branches of economics are necessarily incompatible. Of course, when we talk about the solutions, the proposals that the post-Keynesians make and the proposals that the Austrians make, there are real differences, yes.
And what are those main differences?
Well, the post-Keynesian, for the most part, they don't want to get rid of the central bank. They just want to have more activist monetary policy that in cases where there is a crisis creates liquidity and alleviates the stress from the financial markets, whereas the Austrians would say, well, if we end up in a situation where a crisis is about to happen, we'd rather let it happen quickly.
We need the crisis.
Yeah, we need the crisis to get back onto a healthy economic growth path. And if we just create liquidity and bail out all of the actors that are in need of liquidity, then we will actually not bring about the reforms necessary to get back into a healthy system. We will just perpetuate the problem. We will perpetuate the structural imbalances. We keep the businesses and banks alive that are actually unproductive and should go bankrupt.
And we encourage bad behavior?
And we encourage bad behavior. There's this whole problem of moral hazard, right? If the central bank, and only if it does so implicitly, says we will bail out any bank in need, any business in need, or any of the large businesses in need. Of course, the smaller businesses, you can let them go bankrupt. It's the big players that are bailed out. If the central bank communicates that explicitly or implicitly, and that creates massive moral hazard. Then, of course, banks and businesses know, okay, I can engage in very risky investment strategies. If everything goes well, I make a profit. And if not, I will be bailed out, right? The losses are socialized and the profits are privatized. That's the effect.
You've talked a lot about the brain drain that's happening across Europe. I saw that when I was in Argentina. So Argentina culturally is a very, it's based on the family. Family and friends getting together, barbecues and hanging out, and people don't generally want to leave Argentina, want to be near their family. And the time we were there, one of the things that really stood out to me is the amount of people who I met who said, oh, my son has moved to Australia or my daughter's moved to America. A lot of the young people were leaving the country for opportunity. We're starting to see that in the UK. I assume it's happening across Europe. What is the risk with this, and how big is the problem?
I haven't published that much about it. Only recently I had a short little piece on the brain drain in Europe. And I think it's a real problem. the migration patterns that we see in Europe. I think we're still in a situation where in Europe we have a fairly good higher education system, and we train a lot of the talent from Europe and abroad. Lots of students come to Europe to study, but very few stay afterwards. And a lot of highly qualified people in Europe increasingly feel inclined to leave Europe towards other destinations where they feel they can build something better for themselves. So the United States still remains one of the top destinations, but I think increasingly Asia is a top destination for highly qualified people. And so this leaves Europe in a situation where we lose top talent and we attract migrants. If we look into the official statistics, that has below average educational attainment. And that's problematic in the long run, I would say. The main reasons for this, it's very hard to pin those down. I think to some extent it's over-regulation in Europe. The economy has become very static, over-regulated, where there are high compliance costs and regulatory burdens, which makes it very hard for small businesses to be set up. And it actually creates an advantage for incumbent big firms. It solidifies their and increases their market share, and leads towards a further monopolization of the economy. It's something that left-wingers also like to criticize, but they think it's because of free market dynamics. I think it's because of over-regulation and compliance costs that this is happening, and also because of monetary policy.
So it makes it easy for Starbucks, but difficult for an independent cafe.
Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, also relatively high taxes in Europe. I think that's unattractive. Yeah, if you go somewhere else, you go to the US or you go to, I don't know, Hong Kong, Singapore, you have lower taxes, you have higher net income, and you can build something for yourself and your family. And this is that seems to attract a lot of people, highly qualified people.
So you mentioned the academia there. You mentioned that you think we still have kind of a high quality academia here, high quality universities. But I had my daughter's she'll be doing A-level soon, which is the senior school. She's going to study economics.
Well, good luck.
Well, yeah. So I'm fascinated to see what she brings home. More than any subject she's done before, fascinated to see what she brings home in terms of her textbooks and the things they study, because I studied economics at A-level and we didn't once touch on any Austrian ideas. It was all Keynesian ideas.
Yeah.
And we also interviewed somebody who went to the London School of Economics here in London.
Yes.
And she said it was very much a left-wing economics institution, and she joined I think it was the Hayekian Society.
Yeah, the Hayek Society.
Yeah, Hayek Society. And she said she was an outsider. It was very much fringe within the London School of Economics. And so
I think she said there was 4 members.
Yeah, 4 members.
Oh, wow.
And they were seen as like crazy right-wing economists.
And even in her assignment, she had to, as much as she didn't believe it, write from the side of the left. Otherwise, she, in fear that she would be marked down.
I mean, I knew that the LSE is pretty left-wing. Wouldn't have thought that it is that bad. Only 4 members in the Hayek Society? I mean, Hayek was a professor at the LSE, so come on.
Yeah.
Honor the old man a bit. I used to study at Oxford, and there was a Hayek Society there. Yeah. We had more than 4 members. Yeah,
How many members did you have?
I don't know, around 25 or something. Yeah.
But was it still fringe?
It was a bit of an outlier position, yes. Yeah.
So do you think there's a problem in academia that a lot of more kind of left-wing ideas have taken hold of the institutions, which obviously then carries through into politics and society?
Yeah, I mean, the problem is big in the social sciences. In the humanities, this has become really quite left-wing and radically left-wing. And the problem increasingly exists also in economics departments, probably. But economics is comparatively good, I would say. And even if they are not Austrian, there are many economists who still understand the benefits of a free market system and would also teach that to their students, even though they might not actually refer to Mises or Hayek. Or
What's this, Connor?
I saw this on Twitter recently, just on the topic of education. I think we're seeing this rise in people coming out of Asia in the tech world just excelling.
Hold on,
This is US firms, the heads of the US firms, CEO of Microsoft, FBI nominee, Google CEO, Adobe CEO.
Are these people who have been taught in India, or have they've gone to the US?
I think there's probably a range, right?
I would have thought the majority. I'd guess, but I think the majority of the names I recognize, I would guess they were US taught. Zohar Mandani.
they probably are, the majority of them as US taught. And of course, the US universities attract many more highly talented people globally than the European universities.
There's a great culture around education with Indians, though. Yeah. Yeah, so I worry about academia. I worry about higher education.
Yeah, me too.
Well, what do you worry about?
I worry about a couple of things. I also recently wrote on this. This has not been published yet, but I tried to summarize the argument. When we look at the university, what has happened over the past, let's say, 100 years is that a very elite institution has become democratized. It has become an institution for the masses. So before it was a very tiny minority of people that would go to the university, and it was a very elitist thing to do, to be at the university. Now we have an institution in France, easily more than half of a cohort goes to the university.
I think it's similar here.
Yeah. And so it has become a mass institution, but the university is not willing to accept this change. They still pretend to be an elitist institution, but they are not. And this is true for the students as well as for the teachers. The teachers, the professors are also not the elite anymore.
Because there was too much.
There are just too many of them.
Yeah.
And so you have mediocre teachers and professors. I include myself. I probably wouldn't have a university position if it weren't for this democratization of the university.
I don't know.
And you have students who are not the brightest anymore. You have below average intelligence students. So actually the university have to admit that this has changed, and they have to change their model and how they educate people. So that's one problem, I think, that's going on. And then I increasingly observe a politicization of education and research. And there is a diversion from an old ideal of research and education, which is the ideal of Wertfreiheit, value freedom. So politics has nothing to do in the lecture hall. You as a professor, you leave your politics outside of the lecture hall. You just try to explain cause and effect relationships in the real world. You try to present theories and ideas and confront them. Engage your students in rational debate, and you shouldn't be trying to politicize them or convince them of your own personal opinion about how the world should be, right? And we increasingly observe outright activism in higher education, and that's problematic. And people actually are proud of it. Yeah, there are professors who say, "Of course I do that. Of course, I'm against whatever, right-wing politics, or I'm in favor of socialism, and I promote these ideas in the lecture hall." And they are proud of that. Right? 100 years ago, or more than 100 years ago, Max Weber, the famous German sociologist, wrote about exactly this problem of value freedom. And he said, no, we as academics should try to not engage in activism, in political activism. Of course, we can have a personal opinion about things, but in the lecture hall, this has no place. Now, there are some problems with the ideal of value freedom when you think about it. And Max Weber also admitted to that. He said, well, there's a problem with value freedom because you cannot defend the principle of value freedom on a completely value-free basis.
Yeah.
It is itself a value statement to say that we ought to be value-free in our teaching and research. But still, I think it's a good guide and a good guiding principle, although it might be imperfect and we can ultimately not perfectly reach it. There are some other values that are implied in academic work. For example, you have to value the truth. It is expected that you are not lying about things, right? So that's of course also a value statement to say I value truth and I try to find the truth and convey the truth.
Well, so it's interesting because some subjects are inherently political and some aren't. So math, I think it's very hard to politicize math.
Yeah.
I mean, they've tried.
There are some attempts.
Yeah. But because you can't politicize, like economics is easier to politicize than math in that you could argue. So, for example, I was watching an interview, I think it was with Ludwig von Mises, or it might have been Friedrich Hayek, one of the two, but they were talking about Keynes. He said, I haven't seen him so much recently. He's been spending a lot more time in the political world. And so I would argue Keynesian economics itself is inherently political because it argues for more state intervention. But then you could also argue that Austrian economics is political because it argues for less state intervention.
Yeah, absolutely.
But with math is hard to politicize. The only time they did was when you had those weirdos come out and said that math is racist.
Yeah,
that was an attempt.
They tried to change the standards by which you grade mathematical exams and so on.
Yeah, which was like a political influence.
But you cannot really change or convince people that 2 + 2 is not 4, right? I mean, that's just going to be true.
But even if you were teaching economics, and you were teaching the various schools of economics, Austrian, Keynes, MMT, wouldn't you naturally yourself have your own bias and therefore potentially sound political? Like, can you teach these schools value-free?
I mean, I probably can't.
Yeah, it's
perfectly. I mean, as Weber said, that's actually you have to be an angel to be able to do this, I guess. Or it's fundamentally impossible to be completely value-free. I mean, also as a teacher, you decide what examples you give and what arguments you present and what things you leave out. And there are value judgments involved along the way. But you can still try to present the ideas as clearly as possible and as unbiased as possible. And I try to do that. And I have a lot of students who don't know or don't realize where I'm standing. And I think that's a good thing. And they often tell me that, or even ask me, so do you like Keynes? Because I'm teaching Keynes in economics as well, because that's part of the curriculum. Yeah, so I try to present these ideas in a convincing way and then give them the counter arguments afterwards. But when I go into Keynesian economics in my macroeconomics classes, for example, they seem to be very interested and they have the feeling that I'm really convinced of what I'm telling them. Because I try to make it entertaining in a way and also captivating, right? And I try to make them understand the arguments. And I had multiple students who would ask me whether I would classify myself as a Keynesian.
Would you say that all schools of economics are valid in that they all are an argument and it is about discovering which is the best? Or would you say that Keynesian economics is invalid and been proven wrong? No,
I would not say that. I think our goal should be not to think too much in terms of these economic camps. There are good arguments and bad arguments. There's good economics and bad economics, and you find good aspects in all of these camps. And our task is to just find these elements and then bring them together. Of course, I I am affiliated with a couple of think tanks and institutions that are interested in Austrian economics. I am an Austrian economist because I believe that many very valid and important arguments you can find very clearly outlined in the Austrian tradition. But that doesn't mean that we find occasionally very good arguments in post-Keynesian, Keynesian, or Marxist economics.
Okay, so how do we win the argument then? Publicly, on a large scale.
Well, I wouldn't think about this as a battle of Austrian economics against the rest, right? It's just a matter of convincing people of what is true. And there are truths in economics. And I mean, that's, of course, a controversial statement because some people would argue that there are no general laws in economics and no general truths. Everything is contingent and everything is in the end a power play and so on. I disagree. There are truths to be discovered in economics, and we just have to continue the argument and try to convince people that our arguments are correct.
So what are the most important truths within economics?
Well, there is scarcity. We touched upon that earlier. And that's a fundamental problem. I mean, a great British economist, Lionel Robbins, defined economics to be the discipline where we think about decision-making under scarcity. That's exactly what economics is all about.
But you will never hear that from a politician.
Of course, they don't have an incentive. And some of them are also, frankly, not that intelligent.
Some of them?
Yeah, I would give them the benefit of the doubt. There might be some intelligent politicians.
I think you're being very, very kind there by saying some of them. I see the vast majority of them. Okay, so I'm concerned about this country, and I am very concerned about the future of Europe. Despite the UK leaving the EU, I still consider myself a European as well. I love traveling to France and Germany and Italy. And the way we focus this show now really is we had a long... This is my son, by the way. Did I introduce him as my son?
No, you didn't, but I figured.
Okay, he's my son.
Yes,
so we had a long conversation the other day where I was saying, I think a lot of now really the lens of what we're trying to do is the future, the world our kids will inherit. Because I'm 47. I'm nearing retirement. I'm at the age where I'm at least thinking about retirement. And so I think less about the benefits to me, although I do consider them. I think mostly about the benefits to our children. So I think it's really important that we build a world that our kids inherit. And I think this high debt inflation environment, we're essentially stealing from their future. And we want to do as little of that as possible. So for me, in making this show, it's really important that we try and convince people that the path that our current governments are choosing, the economic decisions they're making, are really bad for the future for the kids, right?
Yeah.
And so, what would you say, therefore, are the most important things that we should be teaching people with a show like this? We've touched upon scarcity and inflation. What direction should we be pointing people in?
I mean, that's a very difficult question.
Yeah.
In essence, you are asking what makes people more future-oriented.
Yes.
Having children is probably a main contributor. You have children, so you care about your children and you want to provide for the future that they can live a good life.
But all children.
All children. But the fact that you yourself have children, I think, contributes to your own conviction to actually improve the future, right? To try to improve the future. There are people without children who are concerned about the future as well. But I think generally speaking, that's a main contributor. And increasingly, we live in a world where people do not have children. So naturally, they will become more present-oriented, I think. That was one of the criticisms, for example, of Keynes and Keynesian economics. Some economists of the Austrian camp would say, well, the fact that he had no children made him so present-oriented. Maybe that's true. I don't think that's necessarily the case. A person who does not have children is not necessarily present-oriented only or doesn't care about the future. But I think that's a contributor. What else? I don't know. What can you do in order to make people more future-oriented?
Is there a particular warning if you wanted to warn people of the trajectory that we're heading down, if you wanted to, I don't know. So for example, I watched recently on Netflix, there was a film called House of Dynamite, which is about nuclear war. I don't know if you've seen it.
I haven't seen that.
And off the back of that, I went and read the Annie Jacobsen book, Nuclear War Scenario.
Yes.
And now I've always kind of understood that nuclear bombs are terrible and devastating, and I saw what happened in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. I've seen the videos and the documentaries, but the Annie Jacobsen book was beyond bleak. I mean, it's a horror novel, essentially. I mean, the devastating impact of thermonuclear war and I think a global thermonuclear war can last around 90 minutes, which leads to complete devastation, half the planet killed, that we would, the survival would be looking for resources in a world which most people have died, and those who survived have no access to electricity, and it's a terrible scenario. I understand the threat of nuclear war a lot more, the threat of nuclear weapons a lot more.
Yeah, that's very interesting. We have a lot of these scenarios, horror scenarios of the future right now in our public debate. Climate change is another example, right? And there is, I would say, a lot of education going on that would classify as indoctrination on this issue, where, there might be problems with climate change, but you shouldn't make a horror scenario out of this. I mean, this is terrifying for young people, right? They are brought up in a world where they are told, you are part of the problem, we are destroying the planet, and you are contributing to it. And, the world will come to an end. And how can you be future-oriented in this situation? It's very hard, right? You have this horror scenario of the future, the world will come to an end. Why would you build something for the future? It's very unlikely that this will happen. So I think what needs to happen in order to make people more future-oriented is to, first of all, say, okay, there might be problems in how the world works right now, but we can solve them. There are solutions. Yeah. And let's think about what the good solutions are. Be a bit more positive about the issue instead of creating fears and horror and talking about all kinds of horror scenarios. Just emphasize the possibility that we can improve the situation. And this would actually give young people some sense of meaning, right? Yeah, we can do something. So yeah, let's try to accomplish something.
Well, okay. What is the economic reality check that you would give, that you would say right now to at least, because in the UK, we have a real issue with convincing people of kind of conservative economics. Socialism is selling, and it's selling fast, and it's selling well. I would like to sell more conservative economic ideas. What's the economic reality check that you would give people?
I'm not sure what you mean by economic reality check.
The reality of where we are. And
how do we get the pendulum to swing, I guess?
Yeah. What is the economic trajectory we're on, and why do we need to change it?
Well, my strategy to change the swing of the pendulum is to, first of all, take seriously the concerns of the people on the left, unless they are complete douchebags and are not actually interested in a debate. But not all of them are. There are fine people who are concerned about certain things, and you can emphasize that, yes, that's a problem, and there are solutions also from the vantage point of what you call conservative economics. I wouldn't call it conservative economics.
Like free market.
Free market economics, maybe, or just economics. And then explain how you can actually solve some of the issues. For example, inequality. That is a good example. Yeah, a lot of people on the left are concerned with inequality. Explain to them that, well, in our current system, there are a lot of contributors to inequality. One of them is, for example, monetary policy, inflationary monetary policy. And then you fairly quickly find common ground where you can actually work together. So this has always been my strategy, to to emphasize, if possible, some common ground. Most people are concerned about the same things. They might disagree a bit on how to solve the problems, but yeah, that's the room where we can have rational debate. But first of all, admit that we are concerned about similar things. That's the first step.
So on this podcast, you are definitely hearing me talk about Bitcoin a lot. Well, why? We live in a really strange time with governments driving inflation with their reckless spending and endless money printing. There is a way out of this. There is a way to protect your money, and that is by stacking Bitcoin. I've made loads of shows about Bitcoin. You can go and research this, you can go and read the books, but the truth is, it is the hardest money ever created. If you are interested in protecting your financial future, it's time for you to get on the Bitcoin train. I've been stacking Bitcoin personally and through my businesses since 2017. It's protected me, it's secured my family's future, and it also strengthens all of my businesses. So if you want to start stacking Bitcoin, where do you do it? Well, for me, it's with Gemini. They're a fully licensed, full reserve exchange and custodian, so they give you a secure way for you to buy and own your Bitcoin. There's no risks and no funny business. So if you're serious about stacking Bitcoin the right way, head over to Gemini.com, which is GEMINI.com. It's kind of what I said about Gary Economics, right? It's like we see the same problems. We see the same symptoms. Our cure is completely different. My cure is ending monetary inflation. His cure is tax the rich.
Yeah.
And I think I'm right, and I think he's wrong.
Exactly, and one shouldn't compromise on this.
But I think that's where you get to the ideological barrier, in that if I sit down and meet with somebody who's on the left and we share the same concerns, if they say, my concern is inequality, I will also say, my concern is inequality. If they say we should tax the rich, and I say, no, that's not the solution. The rich will probably leave, and these systems are bureaucratic and never work. We should get rid of monetary inflation, but that means there's not enough money to spend on some of the things we want. We hit an ideological barrier.
Yes.
Even though I can prove empirically that their solution will actually make the poor and the rich richer.
Well, I think then you just have, if you cannot find the disagreement at this stage of the debate, then you just have to go further. Like, think through all of the implications of the proposal that your left-wing friend makes. Tax the rich. Well, the rich will leave. He might suggest, okay, we close the borders and they can't leave anymore, right? Where does this lead to?
People won't come.
Yeah, so where does this lead to? Just try to draw the picture.
But right? I think the ideological barrier comes because it forces them to realize the vote they normally would give in an election, they can no longer give. The vote they would have normally given to the Labour Party or the Lib Dems and the Greens, they can no longer give, because the party closest to them economically, to the solution which I talk about, will always be a Conservative party, or no vote at all.
Yeah.
And that always becomes that kind of ideological block when trying to meet common ground on real economics.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a difficult task, and I try my best with the moderate resources and means at my disposal to convince people of free market economics. But of course, there is a lot of work to be done still.
Sorry, I'm going to take it completely off course. So.
That's fine.
Okay.
Sure.
How do economists look at the potential impact of AI and the chance that there could just be this complete engulfing of the money supply by 4 or 5 different companies?
AI was the question. Yeah, there are different concerns and ideas.
Have you thought about it much?
Yeah, a bit. I mean, the first question I ask myself is to what extent there is a bubble right now in AI and big tech. And I think there is. There are good reasons to believe that there is some bubble-like situation right now. I don't exactly know, of course, how this will turn out over the next month and years. But I think there is some overvaluation of some companies going on. So that's the first thing.
Yeah.
Then, of course, an obvious...
I don't think that's what Connor's asking, because I'm with you. There is, we're in a bubble. It feels very...
I'm talking 20 years down the line,
right.
Well, 10
years. No, I mean, you say that. I would add to that the present, Connor, in that yes, we can look at the financialization of AI companies and the growth in the stocks and what that might have as an impact on the economy if that bubble bursts, etc. Could that be recessionary? That's fine. I don't think that's the point Connor's trying to make. There's what you see with your own eyes, in that I have a subscription to ChatGPT, Grok, I now have Perplexity, I have Midjourney, and I know the things preparation for this interview. These notes are help. So the way we prepare is we will go into a tool like Grok, and we will ask it, say, about you. Tell us all about you, your background, what you think about. And then we ask it to prepare an arc, say, of an interesting interview, but I will throw in the things I care about, like what I've learned maybe with Austrian economics. We will then take it to Perplexity and say to Perplexity, can you just review this structure? What do you think works? What do you think doesn't? And then I take it to ChatGPT to clear it up. And then we review it ourselves and move things around and put in questions we want. But we're able to produce a really good research piece prepared for an interview in about an hour. We own a football club. All the graphics for our football club are now produced with Midjourney. Yeah. And so I know there's money I used to spend in the economy that I no longer spend. We're more productive, but I know this impact is happening across multiple companies. A lot of entry-level grad jobs are just going because people are using AI. Yeah, so naturally, over time, there's going to be vast changes to industries. I know people who've lost their jobs, say, in marketing, and that job's never coming back. Exactly. It's just gone. Yeah. And so, correct me if I'm wrong, Connor, but I'm thinking short-term, you're thinking mid-long-term. And we've had these revolutions before, industrial revolution, etc., agricultural revolution, but this one feels fast. And the economy is going to have to shift really quickly. How much have you thought about the impact and then the concentration of the money? I think you were thinking about that into a small number of companies, 5 or 6 maybe companies.
Yeah, I've given that some thought, obviously.
Okay.
As I said, I was working a lot on monetary policy and inequality. Then, of course, you have to ask yourself, okay, are there other drivers of inequality? We see increased inequality all around us, and technology might actually be one of the other main drivers. But I think it will not become that bad.
Okay.
It will be self-correcting. I mean, the big issue, I believe, are patents and licenses put in place by government. So if we could reform that in a reasonable way, we would open up a lot more opportunities economically for many people.
Because of more competition.
Of course, more competition, and you have this high concentration of market power because of some of these regulations in place. It's not only because of technology and because of natural network effects and so on. It's also driven by regulations, and there are things we can do about this. Now, one question one has to ask, of course, is what are the types of jobs that will still be needed in 5, 20 years? And as you rightly mentioned, and you, Connor, there are jobs being lost right now, jobs that we wouldn't have thought of being lost just 2 years ago. For example, AI can code. You don't need a programmer, a low-level programmer anymore, because it's the AI that can do it for you now. You don't need a guy doing marketing because AI can do it for you. It increases your productivity. So what are the jobs that will still be needed? And I think, this is a very rough and imprecise answer, but I think it's jobs where there is a bit of a human touch. So, for example, you could also generate interviews, text, discussions, videos with AI. You have an AI-generated person that talks you through the negative effects of inflation. Who wants to watch that? Nobody. I think people would rather watch a genuine interview with a guy who is not perfect, doesn't speak.
You say that. So Google Notebook LLM, I think that's the name of the product. So that can generate podcasts. And what's really interesting about it is I can plug in Hayek's Road to Serfdom, and that will spit out a AI debate between two people regarding the book. So actually, there is there is a replacement there, but there is also competition in the market. Like AI is producing content which is competing with human created content.
Yeah.
And what I see happening is we're losing a lot of expert jobs because an AI is now what, PhD level? I think GPT-5 is PhD level, but on every subject possible.
Yeah.
And so we are wiping out a lot of expert, well-paid jobs.
That's true.
Yeah,
it's true. No, there are massive changes ahead.
But could that drive a recessionary environment in that there are just so many people out of work and there isn't a replacement of jobs in that period? Or are you of the belief that all economic systems self-correct?
I believe that they self-correct, yes. I mean, the problem in a sense is not new. This has been with us ever since there has been technological advances in history. We've always lost jobs. They were always replaced by other jobs. And now we might say that the degree to which jobs are lost right now because of these technological advances is unheard of. We've never seen that before to that extent. Maybe, I'm not sure. But I still believe that the jobs will be replaced. The question is just what will the new jobs look like, and I'm curious to find out. Yeah, it's a fascinating thing to think about. Yeah,
I hijacked your question there, Connor. Is there anything more you wanted to ask on that?
No, it was more so you don't think we get to a universal basic income?
I mean, in some sense, we already have that, right? I mean, we have a welfare state that's pretty big in the UK as well as in other European countries, and there is something like a universal basic income as far as I'm concerned already. We could certainly make that more efficient and less bureaucratic, but yeah.
So that's more the government. What is the government response to this?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's another question. I mean, this is certainly possible. I think that's highly likely that we will think more in that direction. Right?
What do you think of Milton Friedman's? Well, I don't know if it's his idea originally, but I heard him talk about the negative income tax.
Yeah.
Are you a fan of this idea?
Well, I think in some respects that's a more honest proposal. Not very easy to implement. There are some complications, but I think it's an interesting idea, certainly. And I mean, the universal basic income is sort of like an illusion. There is no universal basic income to be paid to everyone. It's always a matter of who pays for it and who is a net receiver, who is a net payer, who is a net receiver. There is no universal basic income for everyone. That just is not true. So call it a negative income tax and have something like, be honest about it. It's the type of redistribution that we are engaging in. It's not that everyone gets money, because that's impossible. Somebody has to pay for it. So in that respect, I would say that Friedman's proposal is a bit more honest in terms of how the things are called and labeled. Yeah.
What is the right size of government?
Difficult. I mean, I am personally, of course, if you ask me what would be my ideal world, what would be my ideal system, then that's no government. How would that look in practice? Very difficult to say. I think one step to go into that direction is to have radical decentralization, the opportunity to opt out of government-provided systems like health insurance and unemployment insurance and things like that. Have political entities being able to split up into smaller units. And in that respect, you would go into a direction where it is much more likely that you end up living in a political community or in a community in general where you can accept all of the rules that are in place. And you think, okay, I have to pay maybe some taxes here or some fees, whatever you might call it. But I think overall what is done with it is fine. I accept the system. and I like to live here. I'm happy with that. And if you are in such a world, then you are actually in the libertarian utopia. If everybody agrees, there's consensus, you're fine with the rules in place and so on, you accept the negative sides because for you the benefits outweigh the negative sides, then that's fine. That is still libertarian utopia. So it's not necessarily a completely strange world that we cannot really imagine. So there are practical reforms we could put in place to get closer to such a situation. And one guiding principle would be decentralization.
Yeah, no, so I mean, as a Bitcoiner, I completely agree with you on decentralization. So one of the challenges I have with libertarian ideas and Austrian economics is that, to me, the Austrians have nailed human behavior, the understanding of incentives and human behavior. Mm. But also, if we would have no government, I also believe we would also, as humans, rebuild government because we naturally want structure.
No, wait, we have to be clear about what that means, government or the state. I said earlier, my ideal would be a stateless society. That doesn't mean that there are no institutions that sort of look like states and do things that states do right now. It just means, for me, that the people who are subjected to states are subjected to the states on a voluntary basis. So they are fine with all the benefits and the negative sides that are included in the arrangements, because it's never perfect. It's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be paradise on earth.
No, I understand that,
but if you can agree to the rules in place and you say that's a system that I can support, that I like to live in, then you are basically in the libertarian utopia, right?
But we require a state to create that environment.
Not necessarily, I think.
But if we don't, I think what my belief is that we naturally end up building government. It's a bit like why you get warlords in Afghanistan.
Yes.
And why you get mafias and such, because there will always be people who accumulate power and money. And in some ways, a good state provides more freedom than no state, because a good state defends freedom.
Yeah.
And so that's almost like the paradox I live in.
No, and that's exactly why a libertarian could agree to certain state-like entities or structures that look like states, that do things that states do right now, because it is actually possible that this is more beneficial to everyone to have such an institution. It's completely imaginable.
So we need to breed more libertarians.
I guess that would be a strategy, yes. Or convince people of libertarian ideas. And I think there's a lot of room to convince people, because many people haven't really thought about it. Just get to talk to people and try to convince them slowly but surely about the benefits of a free society. It's not all about economics, right? It's just about a free society and being able to live your life the way you want to live it.
Well, so, I mean, I think libertarianism is something you discover usually either because somebody around you is a libertarian or your parents are maybe libertarian, but it's not something that's taught at school. You weren't introduced to these ideas at school, were you? I mean, he will have it on his school journey with me hammering it at him, and same with my daughter. But it's not. We don't. I don't think we even have a culture of teaching about freedom and liberty. If anything, our education system is designed to educate the world we have now.
Yeah,
and defend,
train loyal citizens.
Yeah.
And no, I think that's true.
So we need to break away from that. So that comes back to the point is that to move towards a trajectory of more libertarian ideas requires the accumulation of power to do that, which is antithetical to being a libertarian.
No, not really. I mean, you just have to offer alternatives. I mean, we talked earlier about the education system and the problems in the education system. There's clearly a need for alternatives outside of the public education system. And of course, there we are subject to government regulations and all kinds of rules put in place that prevent competition. But to the extent that we can actually offer alternatives, and the internet and information technology offers a lot of opportunities to do that, we should try to do it. Yeah, we should try to offer alternative ways of spreading ideas, discussing theories, and debating with people.
I've got a couple of closing questions. Before I get to them, is there anything I've not asked you about you wish I had?
Oh, no. I mean, I don't know. I haven't really thought about what you would ask me.
I mean, we haven't talked about Bitcoin much.
Yes.
How much of a fan of Bitcoin are you? Do you think this offers hope to libertarians and free market people?
It's certainly fascinating technology, and I'm afraid I was a bit too late to jump on the Bitcoin.
We're still early, man.
Yeah, that's what they all say.
Yeah, no, we are still very early.
I do have some Bitcoins, but I wish I had more. And I think it's a fascinating technology, and there's a lot of potential there. I'm curious to find out where this goes. I have a lot of friends and colleagues who are really interested in Bitcoin and are really deeply involved with it, and are very, very optimistic about what's going to happen with Bitcoin and potentially other cryptocurrencies. So, to me, the biggest advantage of cryptocurrencies has been the possibility to transfer capital across borders without any regulation. This is really a benefit created by this technology that it's hard to overestimate the value of this. I mean, you see people in oppressive regimes around the world, Venezuela, for example. I have some friends or colleagues from there using cryptocurrencies in order to protect their savings and to transfer it into other jurisdictions, into other countries. And
hey, I do that here.
Okay. Oh, is the UK also an oppressive regime?
Well, I've been to Venezuela, and I hold Bitcoin for the same reason Venezuelans do, in that they live in a massively inflation environment.
Absolutely,
I live in one here. So just a couple of closing questions. If a young person was listening to this and was skeptical of the current economic environment, but at the same time ambitious and wanted to be successful and rich and make money, what would your advice to them be?
Well, certainly think about where you invest and how you save, how you protect yourself against inflation. But do not only think in terms of economics. There are also other areas in which you should invest as a young person. In particular, it's social relationships. I think, that's just my own impression. I'm not an expert on this, but I have the feeling that the internet, social media contributes to the isolation of especially young people. And this is something that they should actively work against. They should try to go out into the world, meet real people, and build meaningful social relationships. This can be, with a partner, building a family, but more broadly, having meaningful social relationships, having good friends, having good colleagues, having people you can rely on personally. That's absolutely important, and people should focus much more on that.
And if they were to read one book, and one book only?
An economics book.
I'll leave it open to you.
Well, if you want,
Give us three books.
So, on economics, I think Henry Hazlitt's Economics in One Lesson is a classic.
Yep.
People should read it. If they are not already versed in economics, that's where they should start. If they want to think a bit more broadly about economics and society at large, is Socialism by Ludwig von Mises. We've seen how socialist ideas have become more popular recently, so people should definitely try to read this. It's a much more difficult read than Hazlitt, but it's well worth it.
Connor, what book am I reading at the moment?
That one.
That's the book I'm reading at the moment.
Fantastic.
Guys, read. It's heavy.
It's a fantastic book. I organized a seminar last year in Germany with students where we read the book and discussed it. It's a very rich book. You can learn a lot. Mises was a great thinker. And then if you want to go even a bit more radical, you might want to read Murray Rothbard's The Ethics of Liberty. I think that's a very shocking book for many people who have not been exposed to these ideas. But that would be also a recommendation.
Amazing. Yeah, I've read the first book. Henry has its Economics in One Lesson. I'm on Socialism right now. It's a tough read. It is a dense book.
Yeah, absolutely.
I also need new glasses because the type is so small.
Yeah, it's not for everyone.
No.
But I think if you are ambitious,
Yeah.
you should try it.
And I haven't read Rothbard's Ethics of Liberty.
Much easier to read.
I have read, is it The Anatomy of the State?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's another short little booklet by
Yeah, I
Rothbard.
started with the short ones.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Look, I really appreciate this. I wish we could mainstream this into the conscious mind of young people and create more libertarians and hopefully a more prosperous economy. But I appreciate you coming in and joining us for this. And thank you. Good luck.
It was a great pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for listening. We will see you all soon.